Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Healing Words podcast. Our guest today is Christine Osborne. Christine grew up in the Midwest and she currently lives in Arkansas. She considers her relationships with God and family to be the most important part of her life. She joyously decorates, cooks, and organizes get togethers in her home as she values time spent with loved ones and the opportunity to pour love into the lives of others. But it hasn't always been this way. She joins us today to discuss her memoir, What Happened to Chrisanne. Thank you for joining us today, Christine.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, in case anyone didn't pick it up, you did not have a typical white picket fence growing up.
Correct, far from it.
Okay, could you give us a little idea of what happened in your home?
Okay, well, my parents separated. They never married, but they separated when I was very young. And so I started out life with my mom and my brother, um, poor, but we didn't really know in the beginning that we were poor. And before, when it was just her, we were actually happy the first few years. She loved us. She paid attention to us. She didn't have two nickels to rub together, but we were happy kids. We were dirty. We didn't have anything, but we were happy. And things took a drastic turn when I was about 5 years old, when she met my stepfather. And I still remember even today, the very night that I met him. It was just the beginning of many years of emotional, psychological, physical, and even sexual abuse. It started with emotions, it started with mind games, then it became physical, and then it escalated into the unthinkable. This went on for several years, but I wasn't the only one in the family that he was abusing. He was also abusing my mother, and she quickly lost her backbone. She lost her nerve, her identity. She was a registered nurse, educated, good at what she did, but lived in fear. And so my mom never rescued me. My mom was never, she was afraid. She was afraid. And we were afraid of him. And as children, we knew she was afraid of him. And we were reluctant to go to her because we knew she couldn't help us. As I said, the abuse escalated over the years. I talk about the various things, various incidences in the book. When the abuse became sexual with me, I entered into an all-time low, dark, desperate place. I was about 11 years old when it became that intense. And I remember it was the beginning of my 7th grade year at a brand new school. And within the first few weeks, there are a lot of introductions when it's a new school year and you're a 7th grader. Within the first few weeks, a beautiful lady walked into our classroom and introduced herself as the school counselor. And I remember her face, even to this day, every detail of her demeanor and the way her voice sounded. And I really don't remember everything she said except the very last sentence. And the last sentence was, "So, if you ever have a problem, come to my office. I'll help you out." And I took that to mean she could help me in my situation. I thought what that meant was I would go to her office, I would tell her what's going on, and she would tell me lots of things to make me feel better and help me out of this darkness. What I didn't know at that time was that she would be required to report it to the authorities. And I did go to her office. I did tell her what's going on. And she asked me to come back to her office the next day. I did. She let me know that by law, she had already contacted the authorities. They were talking to my parents, and I was mortified. I was terrified because I thought, oh my gosh, now I've got this bad situation and I've turned it into a horrible situation because I was afraid of my abuser. And I was also ashamed because my mom was going to now know that he had turned to sexual abuse toward me. And it went from there. And that counselor actually became my first foster family.
Mhm. Okay. You mentioned you were ashamed, and
Mhm.
not to give too much away.
Mhm.
When you told your counselor, you kind of
Mhm.
dressed it up. You
I
didn't say
did.
that it was you, but
You're right.
tell us how she responded.
Okay. I did go to the counselor, but I could not tell her this was really happening to me. So I lied. I said, I have a friend, and this is what's happening to my friend. And the counselor would respond as though I was saying, this is what's happening to me. She would say, well, what did your stepfather do? I said, no, 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 not me, my friend's stepfather. And I would explain, well, he makes her do this and he does this. And she would say, um, and what else does he make you do? And it was frustrating, but in my stubborn mind, even though I knew she knew, I wasn't going to admit it. I couldn't. By this time in my young mind, I had developed very strong defense mechanisms. I had developed a really strong, what I thought was a safeguard. I thought I was hidden. I thought my shame, my pain, my embarrassment, my suffering, I thought it was hidden and no one could see it. Um, she saw through all of that. And today I can say I'm glad she did, but I never admitted to her until later. Yeah, you were right. Of course, she knew she was
She
right.
knew it. She knew that
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, so tell us, y- give us an idea of your self-perception at this point. You're about to go into foster home, and this won't be
Hmm.
the first one. Um, how did your time growing up in your house make you feel
Prior to the foster homes, or
prior prior to the
okay.
foster homes? Mhm.
By this time, I was very cemented in a lot of lies. I didn't know at that time they were lies, but I believed that I was unloved. I was unwanted. I was not valuable. I was not worthy of proper treatment. I was not worthy of love. Something was broken in me. Something was wrong with me because my childlike mind could not conceive that adults, especially my parents, who I could trust or wanted to trust, that they could abuse me or turn the other way or not help me or not rescue me. Parents don't do that. So it had to be me. So I felt very dirty, unvaluable, unloved, just nobody wanted me. I wasn't worth fighting for. That's how I felt.
And tell me of any emotional or psychological fallout from those thoughts about yourself that followed you into your young adulthood and the decisions you made.
Well, when I started going through the foster care system, like I said, the counselor who helped me, she and her family were my foster home for the biggest period of the time. They were my foster family two different times, and there were other foster homes here and there, and even a girls' home. And she was good about getting to the point. Saying, this is what happened to you. You were molested. You were abused. Whatever the truth was. And she was good at about speaking truth to me. Chris, you are lovable. You are valuable. You are all these, all the good things. The issue was I didn't believe her because I
Mm.
didn't feel those things. And I wanted those things to be true, but I didn't see that they were true, because if they were true, this stuff would never have happened. And it took a long, long time. It took many years, even after being out of the abuse and in a safe environment, for me to even begin to entertain the idea that, well, maybe I was lovable even back then, and it was my abuser's fault. Maybe I am valuable. Maybe I am all these good things, and maybe those are lies. Maybe, and at one point I did realize I've been believing a ton of lies, but it was a deprogramming and reprogramming process to get those lies out of your thinking and to start believing the truth. But it literally took decades, what I call the aftermath years, um, to become a healthier person, to, when you go through this stuff for years and years, it molds you. It shapes your
Mhm.
thinking and your thoughts and your ideas and your dreams and your visions and everything. And so to totally get to a point where you can differentiate the lies from the truth, and then start shedding the lies and replacing it with truth, it doesn't happen overnight. And it's hard. And in the
Yes.
middle of all that, you're confused. I was confused. I was making bad decisions. I didn't know what healthy relationships looked like. I didn't know what healthy discipline looked like. I didn't know that about healthy goals. I didn't know. I had never seen it. So I had to learn all these things.
Much later than usual.
Yes.
So were you, what kind of people were you attracting and attaching yourself to? Were they unhealthy as
Um,
well?
well, many of them were, yes. During the years when I was running and trying to figure out what's wrong with me, how do I get away from the bad stuff, and how do I incorporate good stuff in my life, I resorted many times to what I knew. And I think a lot of women do this when they've been abused. What they learn when they've been through years of abuse is your body talks. Then they believe a lot of lies. All men want is your body. You're no good to somebody with that unless you give them something. Um, you're not really, you can't really set boundaries because you're a little damaged, you're a little used up. Nobody's really going to want you if you make it too hard. Um, I attracted people who picked up on those cues. I attracted other people who, whether they realized it or not, related or identified with my weaknesses or my unhealthy thinking or unhealthy behavior. And so oftentimes I would date or even marry men who were just as messed up as I was. They needed help just like I did. And so you put two unhealthy people together and it's a disaster. It's a
Absolutely.
disaster.
So did you have counseling at all?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
At different times of my life. And the counseling started when I entered that first foster home.
Mm.
Um, and there was a doctor, Dr. Sally Goforth, and I mentioned her in my book, who made a huge impact on my life. Um, in later years, as a young adult, as I'm going through these aftermath years, I realized at different times, oh, I need help again. I need help again. And so I was able to seek out help. And so it was different counselors or different people. But the therapist that made the biggest impact out of all of them was Dr. Sally Goforth. She she was one of the very first people to smile at me and look at me and put her little hand on my knee and say, Chris, this isn't your fault. And something about Dr. Sally that when she said it, I believed it. I don't know what it was, but she helped me a lot.
Okay, so when did your relationship with God start and grow and mature?
I went through most of, well, let's say, I went through most of my 20s thinking I did not need God. Um, During this time, various people would say things to me like, have you ever thought about letting God help you with some of these issues? Or have you ever thought about, basically trying to make me at least think about God? And I would actually laugh at them And I'd say, no, 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 I need real answers. And I didn't want to follow God. I didn't know enough about him to think he could help me. But I would say it was my late 20s. And I was in my second bad marriage. And he had yet left me again. He had done that many times before. He was an abusive man. And I was getting so distraught over all the drama and the vicious cycles and the unhealthy ways of living. I was so done with it, and I didn't know where to turn. And it was a Saturday morning, and I woke up. My daughter was at her father's home. My husband at that time had left me again. I was by myself, and I laid there thinking about the fight the nights before. And I was just laying there thinking about what a loser I was, what a disaster and failure my life was, how I'm never gonna be happy, I'm never gonna get treated right, just a lot of lies going through my head. And it was that Saturday morning that things that people had said to me through the years in the past started coming back to my memory. Things, little seeds that people planted about
Ah,
God that I ignored or laughed at before. I'm laying there I would hear the words and I'd think, huh, you know, just kind of pondering it. And I remember that morning, I threw my legs over the side of my bed. I was going to get out of bed. I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll go buy some paint. I'm going to paint my bathroom a pretty color, and that's going to cheer me up and that's going to make me happy. And somehow that's going to turn my whole life around. And I threw my legs over my bed, and there was like this undeniable knowing in every fiber of my being, don't let your feet touch that floor without changing. And I'm like, whoa, what's that? And I pull my feet back in bed and I'm thinking, what? What is that? My mind's playing tricks on me. And I laid there pondering again. I'm a failure. My life's over. And then I think about the little seeds, the little things people said. And I throw my legs over the side of the bed again. I'm going to go paint that bathroom. And again, it's just this voice, not audible, but this voice in my head and in my heart that said, if your feet touch that floor, the way you are, you will always be that way. It will never get better. And it was scary. It was really scary. And fast forward, this went on literally for hours that day. I was literally too afraid to get out of bed to let my feet touch the old wooden floor that I lived on, because I thought if I do, their hope is gone. That's what I thought. And I cried and I thought, and I laid there and I finally thought, God, is that you? Right? Is that God talking to me? I mean, I didn't know. And God made himself known to me. I heard, I am the way, I'm the truth, and I'm the life. And these are not words that a person on this earth had said to me. These were not words I don't know where I heard those words. I couldn't recall, but I heard the words, I'm the way, the truth, and I'm the life. And I knew in my heart, oh my goodness, I have to give my life to God, because he's the only way that I can put my feet on the floor and get up and be different and my life not be over. And I did pray in the only way I knew how, and it was very simple. And I said, okay, God, I did it my way all these years and it didn't work. I'm going to do it your way, but you're going to have to show me how. And I gave my life to Christ. I committed my heart to living for God, doing it God's way, and doing what I had to do to learn what that meant and what that looked like. And I threw my feet over the edge of the bed and I put them on the ground. And I knew that moment my life was going to be different going forward. And I sought out people that I knew who went to church, who knew God, and I began going to church. I made it official, made it public that I had become a Christian. And I started learning more truth. I started learning through reading the Bible, through these women who came alongside of me and were teaching me things. I started seeing the difference between the lies that I'd been living and the truth that is out there. And day by day, it was daily, repeated obedience. Oh, I got to change this. Oh,
Mhm.
I need to believe this. Oh, and it was just a daily process, and it's still going on. Um, that's when my life started turning, and it's been growing ever since.
Amen. Amen. Let's talk about how the effect of the abuse and the fact that you told the truth,
Mhm.
how did that affect your relationship with the other members of your family?
Um, Growing up,
I'm sorry, let's talk about who else lived in your house first. Who else?
okay.
Who made up your family?
Well, growing up, it was myself, my brother, and my mom. Then she
Mhm.
met my stepfather, who became our abuser. They
Mhm.
had a child. So growing up, I had a brother and a sister, my mom and my stepdad. Now, we also had a lot of contact. We had cousins that we were very close to. I had an aunt and a grandmother that I was very close to. They knew that our stepfather was a jerk. They knew that he was abusive to our mother because they could see the bruises and they knew her and they got it. They weren't dumb. They knew that he treated us kids poorly. They think by things they witnessed or heard. They never knew the extent of the abuse that he inflicted on me until many years later. And they never knew the full story until I wrote my book. So they knew that I was taken out of the home because he had abused me. What they were told was he molested me, that it was mild sexual abuse, which is bad enough, but that's as far as they knew that it went. And the
Mhm.
reason is because it took until I wrote my book for me myself to be able to utter all the words.
Mhm.
My husband of 25 years now is the first person on this earth that has ever heard the full story. And he heard this as we got to know each other, as we've been married, and as I wrote the book. And then now the whole world knows the full story. But
Okay.
I have a good relationship with my family members
Okay.
today.
Excellent. Let's talk about the role of forgiveness and how that worked and how that played out in your life.
Well, you mean forgiving my abuser or forgiveness in general?
Forgiveness in general.
Okay. Forgiveness in general, I'll set the abuser aside for the moment. Forgiveness in general was not hard for me because I loved my people. I
Mhm.
loved my mom and my brother and my sister, and I wanted and craved their love, and I wanted their affection, and I wanted things to be good with us. So if I was ever treated poorly or got hurt or got angry, it really wasn't hard for me to forgive them because I needed them. Um, my abuser, on the other hand, I went many years when in the aftermath years hating him, trying to connive ways to get even with him, trying to find ways to ruin his life because I felt that he had ruined mine. Could never have fathomed forgiving him because in my mind, I think like a lot of people think, or at that time, I thought like a lot of people think, why should I forgive him? He abused me. He abused me in unbelievable ways. He abused my mother. He did horrific things, things I talk about in my book. He never, I mean, it was horrible. he tortured me, and I'm thinking he doesn't deserve to be forgiven. He deserves what he did to me. And so I couldn't forgive him for a long, long time. But when I became a Christian, I would say I went through levels of forgiveness toward him. I became a Christian, and of course, my heart started softening, and I wanted peace even over my past. And I got to a place where I could honestly say, okay, I no longer hate him. I no longer wish anything bad to happen for him. In fact, I hope he finds peace for himself and has a good life. That's real. I honestly got to that place. And so I felt that I had arrived at forgiveness. Then, maybe a few years later, a little more maturity, I thought, I need to pray for him. I need to pray that he really does find peace. I need to pray that God forgives him, that that this man really does change. And so I did that for a while. And then there was a day that I had only been married to my husband for a few years, and I was washing dishes. And again, I felt the Lord speak to my heart and says, you need to forgive him. And I argued with God. Oh, I did. I forgave him a long time ago. He said, no, 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 you need to tell him. And I did not want to do that. I did not want to forgive him. And I learned, because I eventually did forgive him, I learned that I had to do that not only because God told me to, but I had to do that for me. I had to learn that forgiveness was not for him. Forgiveness was not to make my abuser feel better about what he did. Forgiveness was not saying, it's okay now. Forgiveness was not saying we can be friends now. Forgiveness was not saying you didn't hurt me, you didn't torture me, you didn't ruin it wasn't saying any of that. It wasn't for him.
Right.
Forgiveness was me saying, you know what? You did this to me and you were dead wrong. But I refuse to go on anymore carrying the pain from it, the anger, the bitterness, all of the negative, hurtful things. I refuse to carry it anymore. I choose to let it go, to be free from it, because I deserve to be free.
Right.
I deserve to be free. He did not deserve to be, this wasn't for him.
Right.
So I had to learn the true meaning of forgiveness in order to forgive him.
Now, without giving away too much in the book, you do come face to face with your abuser
Mhm.
um, as an adult. Tell us one or two things that you walked away from that meeting with, because when we read it in the book, you're
Yeah.
very clear that this was the right thing to do. This is what you
Mhm.
were being led to do.
Yes,
But you were battling, even standing in front of him. There was a battle going on.
there
Talk to us
was.
about that.
There's a chapter in my book called Eyeball to Eyeball, and it is toward the end of the book. But I also I really start my book with that scene, with me as an adult, as a married adult, walking up to my abuser's porch. It was dark. It was a cold night. There was ice on the ground. And it was a walk from my vehicle to his front door that I never thought I would take. And like you said, I was battling. On this hand, I'm thinking, I have to look him in the eye and say the things I need to say and do what I need to do to free myself. But then on the other hand, that little girl inside of me is screaming, no, 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 no. Remember what he did to us? Remember the fear? Remember what he did? Remember? And so all those emotions that were embedded inside of me kept trying to rear their ugly heads and argue with that knowing of what I needed to do. And I remember even in the beginning when I was writing my book, there was a lady who contacted me who wanted to coach me. She wanted to be involved in the book and wanted to coach me. Didn't know me, didn't know my story. She said, why don't you send me 2 or 3 chapters and I'll tell you what I think. And I emailed 2 or 3 chapters. And she asked for my number. She called me, and the first thing out of her mouth is, I have to know, did you kill him? Because when you read that first chapter, that's exactly what I wanted to do. And it comes through when you read it. So toward the end of the book, in chapter Eyeball to Eyeball, I'm walking up to his porch. It was the little girl, the abused little girl inside of me battling with the healing adult that I am today. And I was doing it out of obedience to God. I was doing it to reclaim my freedom, to reclaim who God made me. And I was terrified all the way up onto the porch. I heard my feet walking on that wood porch. I felt my knuckles knocking on that door. His wife opened the door. My mom had passed at this time. By this time, he was remarried. She opens the door, and even looking in and seeing him, I was terrified. I thought, oh my gosh, this is the man who threatened to kill my mother. This is the man who did this and this and this. That's him right there. But as soon as I took that very first step over the threshold of that front door, stepping over in obedience, I was filled with peace. The fear left me, the anger, the confusion, the all of that left me. All those things that had been in me for so long were just gone. And for the first time in my life ever, I was standing in front of this man without fear, without my body going numb, without anything. I stood there and felt like I had all the power.
Mm.
And I did look him in the eye, and nobody lied about what he did. He didn't deny it.
He apologized.
He ended up apologizing to me, apologizing to my husband, fully admitting what he did. Most abused people never get that. Never. It's a huge gift. He did apologize. And I didn't stand there and say, well, no, that was in the past. I'm okay now. I didn't do any of that. I let him apologize. I acknowledged everything he said. I said, yes, you did that. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. And by the grace of God, it's like I wasn't even in control of my words anymore. They were just flowing out of my mouth. And I said, but I forgive you. And when I said that, it was like I could almost hear in my ears, the chains fell off of me, the shackles fell off of me, doors opened, gloominess left, sunshine came in, my spirit was filled, and it was like, whew. I didn't know that there was that kind of freedom in forgiveness. I thought I had already arrived, and I experienced like, whoa. And I looked at him again and I thought, huh, you really don't have any power over me. I mean, it doesn't change anything he did,
Right.
but it changed me and it set me free. And I had never felt that kind of power in
Wow.
freedom before. So
And that
that,
is remarkable because you had forgiven him, and then making the trip to stand in front of him were two different things.
yes,
Wow.
yes. And I am in no way suggesting if you've ever been abused, go confront your abuser. That's an individual, everybody's journey is individual, but that's what God told me to
But,
do.
right. You were led to do this.
He knew that there was more freedom for me, but
Mhm.
I had to be obedient. I had to do it. I had to go get it.
I want to back up just a bit and talk about, I'm going to call them angels, the
Okay.
people that God placed around you as light and as help. Because I
Okay.
really believe that sometimes when we're in the midst of it, it's hard to see the Nathans that we have around us. It's hard to
Mhm.
see these angelic flesh and blood helpers. But you had several, and a few of them you're still friends with today, all these
Yes,
years later.
that's
Let's
true.
let's talk about a few.
Okay. Well, when you're a kid and you come from a trauma, home or a dysfunctional home, when someone is nice to you, it changes your life.
Mhm.
Um, there were a lot of people around me. There were teachers, Sunday school teachers, neighbors, even strangers who would see me, who really didn't know anything about what was going on at home, but knew enough to know something's not right. And some of them didn't even know that. I had elementary school friends whose parents always welcomed me in their home, and they had no idea that I was getting abused at home. They had no idea there was a problem at home. They were just being nice people. They were just being welcoming, and they didn't know. And I would tell anybody out there listening that I would say this: kindness, no matter how big or small, is never ever wasted, especially on a child. You don't have to know the details. You don't even have to know that there's a problem. But if you make it a practice to be kind, to be patient with kids, to treat them like they're lovable, like they're valuable, you're probably going to change lives. And that's what several people in my life did. They gave me just enough comfort to move on to the next day or the next week, just enough encouragement. They made me feel special. You know, even when my teachers would say things like, "You're such a bright student. What a good reader you are." Has nothing to do with the abuse at home, but it made me feel like a person, and it
Mhm.
gave me a little more strength to get through that abuse at home. Or the church ladies who always, they knew I walked in by myself because my brother and I would walk to church just to get out of the house. And the church ladies would see us and they'd say, "Come and sit with us." And they'd make sure other girls played with us and nobody made fun of me. They didn't know the details, but they changed my life. They made me feel safe. You
Mhm.
know, um, there was countless people who were just nice people. One stranger one time followed me home from the laundromat because she had witnessed me pulling a red wagon full of lots of loads of laundry, and I was just a little tiny thing, and it was several blocks from home, and she thought that was terrible. And she followed me home and knocked on my door, and my mother answered. She scolded my mother right there in front of me and then left. And that made me feel like, whoo, I must be important. It just made me feel good that somebody would stand up for me. So the kindness that everybody showed me throughout my years, I don't forget any of it.
And understandably, you have a heart of compassion for children. And there have been three children who were lost, and you helped get them back to their parents. Tell us about that.
Yes, it's not anything I ever planned or expected or tried to do, but there were three different times in my life where I found a child who turned out to be lost and was able to get them back. The first time we lived overseas, my first husband and I lived in Germany, and we were at a park, a public park, and we saw a little girl crying, just walking around crying, and nobody was helping her. Nobody, and I didn't speak German, and she didn't speak English, but through hand motions and looking at her and and all that, we were able to communicate that she was lost. And so we walked around with her, and after quite some time, we saw a woman running up to her, and it was obvious that was her mother. um, there was another time, also in Germany. We lived in a high-rise apartment building, and I looked down. I just happened to be looking out the window, and I saw a little bitty tiny child out in the distance in a field. And it took me a long time staring it to understand, is that a child? Is that an animal? What is that? And I went down, and it was a little boy, maybe about a year and a half old, and crying, lost, dirty. Um, I didn't know who he was, where he was. He couldn't tell me. We walked around a nearby neighborhood quite a bit. Nobody was looking for a child. And so I took him home, and we called the authorities. And by this time, mom had realized her son is missing, and they were able to get reunited. And then the last time was in a town near where I live. Just happened to be driving down a busy road and saw a small girl, just really dirty, really neglected, half clothed, walking on the side of this busy street. And through a small series of events, we're able to get her back to her parents. And I see myself, especially in that last one, in the little girl, because the details are different, but before I stopped for her, a lot of people passed her by. And I don't know if they didn't see her or didn't pay attention, or I don't know why, but the same as in my life, there were certain people who paid attention, who stopped and recognized there's a problem and this little girl needs help. And they couldn't do everything. No one person did everything, but every person did something to kind of get me to the next place.
Almost
And
like paying it back, paying it forward.
I guess, I
Yes.
guess so. I'm happy to have done it.
So are you working on another project now? Will there be a follow-up to this or any other writing that you're going to be doing?
There will definitely be more writing. I have ideas for other books. Um, I can't say exactly what the very next book will be. I don't know yet. There will be
Mhm.
other books. I think that that's in my heart now, and that's what I need to do. Since publishing my book earlier this year, I have been involved with several speaking engagements. I've spoken at a women's conference and different churches and different groups of people. I have put myself out there to be available because to me, this is about spreading the word of this type of thing happening and encouraging victims to heal. Um, and so that's what I'm trying to do. You know, childhood abuse, especially sexual abuse, is much more prevalent in this world than what a lot of people realize. But what's staggering is you take that number of people, of kids that get abused, and then you look at the number of adults walking around in this world now who were abused as children and they never told anybody, and that number is so much bigger. There are so many more secrets about childhood abuse, especially sexual abuse, than there are revelations of it. I want to tell women or men that if anything like this has happened to you, number one, you mattered then and you matter now. And your story matters. Um, and it isn't their fault. And what they've been carrying all these years, the shame, the guilt, the bitterness, the anger, the confusion, all of that, that's not theirs to carry. That's where their abuser put them, and they don't have to stay there. So right now in my life, I am doing everything I can do to spread the word of awareness, to encourage healing by telling my story and telling where I was and where I am now, and showing that the road wasn't easy. There's a lot of people who don't understand, who say, well, that was so long ago. Get over it. That's in the past. You're fine now. What's your problem? And I heard those things many times in all these aftermath years. And I want the world to know that when this happens, it messes you up. And it's not that you don't want to make good decisions or that you don't want to think a certain way or feel a certain way. You don't know how. And
Right.
you have to learn how. So.
Exactly, exactly. So where can our listeners find you on social media?
Okay, well, I am on Facebook at Christine Orsman on Facebook.
Mhm.
I also am available through email, caorsman@yahoo.com. Um, and those are the main, or Messenger, those are the main points of contact. I get messages a lot from people I don't know who say, I heard about your book and I read it, and then they tell me what impact it had on them. Um,
Okay. Excellent. Okay, so we're at the point in our conversation where I ask the same five questions of all of our guests. We're the Healing Words podcast. I'm going to use the first letter from the word words.
okay.
Okay, W, when? When did you know definitively that you were going to write this book?
I knew for sure after several years of arguing with God, trying to bargain, saying, well, just show me the purpose and I'll do it. I didn't want to write the book. I didn't want to rip the scabs off. I didn't want to reveal, relive the emotions, and I didn't want to tell the whole world about it. But the moment I knew I was going to write the book is after one agonizing night. I was tossing and turning, couldn't sleep, and I just sat straight up in bed and I said, all right, fine, God, I'll do it. Because I wanted peace, because I couldn't deal with, I need to write it, but I don't want to anymore. And so I submitted to God that night. I'm okay, I'll write the book. I had never written a book. And I said, God, you're just going to have to show me how. But that's when I knew. And that was about 4 years ago.
Okay, so it took about 4 years.
It took 3 years
Mhm.
to write the book and to get it published. And it's been out a little less than a year. So.
Okay. Okay. Oh, organize. How did you organize your day? Were you working full time
Mhm.
at this point?
At that point, yes, I had a full-time job at a private Christian school, and I loved my job. Had no intention of quitting. I thought, well, I'll just write this book on the side. As I got deep into it, I realized this is serious, this is hard, this is intense, and I can't do both. And so I quit my job. I gave notice, I had a very understanding boss, and I just said, I have to write the book. And it has to be done right, and it has to be done well, and I can't do both. And he understood. I quit my job and I finished the book.
Okay. R is for rear view. What
Mhm.
would you tell um, Christine in the sixth grade Christine?
Mm. I would tell her the exact things that I wrote. At the back of my book, there's a letter that I wrote to other victims. And I would not have been able to write that letter, as a child. But if I could go back, I would go back and tell young me that all those things I felt, that all those moments that I felt unwanted and unloved and unseen and unheard, that those moments mattered. I would tell her that I mattered back then when I was getting abused and neglected and given away by my parents. And when all those things happened, I mattered then and I matter now. And my story matters, just like every individual person's story matters. And I would tell her all those things you carry, that embarrassment, that shame, that all those things, that's not yours. That's not
Mm.
yours. That's his. It's not yours. And I would tell her, you're gonna dance again. You're gonna smile again. You're gonna be free. You just don't give up. Just don't give up. You're gonna get to the other side. Um, and I would just hug her and hold her hand and pull her through.
Exactly. When you say hold the hand, it reminds me when your guidance counselor told you to meet her in the grocery store
Yeah,
and she held out her hand and you said the only hand I'd ever held was my mother's.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was the one that rescued me. That was the
Hmm.
guidance counselor. She rescued me in the middle of the night, and she offered me human touch. She
Hmm.
offered me safety, and she got me out of there. And those were things that were foreign to me other than my mom. Well, the hand holding. Um, yeah,
Okay.
I remember that
Okay.
moment.
S, strengthen. How have you been strengthened by the writing of this book?
I'm definitely bolder when it comes to telling my story, because even though when I started writing the book, I thought I've pretty much arrived at healing. God's really brought me through. I'm good. The more I wrote, the more I remembered, and the more I realized that all my life, the biggest focus of my childhood had been on the sexual abuse, because that was like the tip of the iceberg. And then the foster homes and everything that came after. And I knew life was miserable before that point, but I never thought much of it. So writing the book made me see there was a lot more sorrowful, horrible, sad things that happened that I never understood how bad they were. So I came out of writing this book with a better understanding of what I experienced. I came out with a stronger knowing in my heart that I didn't do this. Somebody else did this to me. I was innocent. I was young. I was powerless. But I also came out of it with a better understanding of knowing how free I really am from that pit that the abuser put me in. And the more I talk about it, it just gets reinforced every time. And the more I speak in public about it, the more people come to me in various ways and say, yeah, me too. That happened to me too. And you said it, so now I can say it. And it's empowered me in that way. And I'm so thankful. I'm very thankful.
And we're thankful that you took the time and were obedient to write this book. Thank you so much for stopping by and chatting with us today. And I hope our listeners go out and get What Happened to Chris Ann, From Betrayal to Ultimate Freedom. It is on Amazon. And in the liner notes, I'll leave connections where you can connect with her on social media if you would like to. So we're going to sign off from now. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time on Healing Words Podcast.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.